slate. First on the agenda tonight is 43 Hill. I'm assuming we're going to do 43 and 51 together, right?
Okay. And I have the affidavits of posting and the affidavits of mailing. I have reviewed same, and they're all in good form. The board has jurisdiction.
John, does the board do a motion to open the public hearing?
Yes, please.
I thought we went down this already.
Sorry?
I thought we went down this path already. Rules of order. So we need a motion to open a meeting. So the public hearing, okay, because this is gotcha. So motion to open a public hearing on 43 and 51 Hill Street. Second, please. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Sorry.
Thank you. All right, so we'll start looking at 43. Sure. Oh, yeah, apologies. I'm Ed Parker from 1100 Architect on behalf of the ownership group for 43 Hill Street. And I will start here, which is essentially the existing and move to the proposed. When I was here in the working group most recently, we reviewed it. I have also subsequently received some comments from Dean, Fire Marshal. And so we're addressing some of his comments here too. But the main point that I took away from our last meeting was that we should look at the comprehensive master plan, and I believe that was specifically as in regards to landscape. So we did that, and I believe that we are complying with the request there, which is 10% of the parking lot area in Greenscape. I think we did two different calculations. I'm looking for where I have them, but what's within the existing parking lot is now 10%, and if we go outside of that with the perimeter Greenscape, it's above 10%.
Perfect. Great.
In doing so, I mean, part of what we had thought we might do initially was, if we were just going to keep everything exactly as it was, reuse the existing parking spaces. But in reconfiguring this to provide the landscaping, we're also redoing the parking spaces. I'll note that the existing parking spaces are not of the dimensions that are required currently, so these all comply. We're also showing cross access in its existing location, provided that the neighbor agrees with that, or however that may be. That's the spot where we're saying it's perfectly fine for it to be, and we're also showing the turning radiuses of a fire truck, which is something that Dean was concerned about. So I think that that's the main changes really from the last time we were here have pretty much only to do with this. I think also, though, I'll say the parking calculation may have changed because we have made the amount of seating in Cinema 1 even less than it was when this was originally submitted. So the parking calculations now are, I'm going to turn it around for myself for just a second. Right, I believe that we need 98 parking spaces, and we're proposing in the parking lot 115. So we're above the requirement for the theater. And I can elaborate on the project further if you like, but that I just wanted to point out is different from the last time we saw it.
No, that looks great. That's a good improvement.
Great.
Do you want to? That's just for the theater. Do you want to go into the restaurant too?
I can do that. Sure.
And let me put that in context. The one thing the planning board will be focused on is the cross access between the theater and the restaurant, so that in the back the parking applies to both and is considered as a whole.
Okay,
in-
yeah, I
In
think,
perpetuity, not if the ownership changes, you can't park here, you have to park there, et cetera. We don't want to run into that situation.
yeah, that is kind of I mean, I think that's a broad question that I wanted some clarity on. Like, right now, they're separate properties, separate owners, and there's no parking available for 51. It's landlocked, so to speak. And I believe that they do use the lot, and they have. Although I don't believe there's any formal agreement in place for that use. So it is a question. I mean, I don't think that there's any concern about the parking lot being used for patrons of that space, provided it becomes the desired project, which is for a restaurant. But I don't know, I don't know how formally that is codified, right? So this is 51. The idea here is the front half of the building to remain as is, the back half of the building to become a 16-seat restaurant / wet store, where we would have table service inside, but no tables outside. This is re-landscaping the rear, which is currently all bricked hardscape, so that it's more pervious and a pocket park, so to speak. The existing cross-access that exists is pedestrian, and we propose to keep it that way, both to the alley side, to the parking lot, and also there's a small stair that runs up to the neighbor right now. We're not showing moving that either. We haven't coordinated any changes with the neighbor, but that would be on grade, and that is, the two properties kind of work together, I think, from a landscaping standpoint at that point. Also.
And you got the fire marshal's comments on both properties?
Yes, and
Yeah,
we've
okay.
incorporated those. And he had, his comments were mostly about, the fire truck and some ADA things, but I
Right.
think that we've got them all covered now
Right.
in compliance.
Alex, Kathy, did you want to address the cross-access specifics and how that's typically handled?
Just by agreement. So cross-access for pedestrians is much more, it's simpler than for vehicular cross-access, of course. But the idea is that the patrons of this restaurant would be allowed to park, as the chairman said, at the 43 Hill Street, and indefinitely, as long as they stay in the same type of use. So, I mean, eventually it may be that the movie theater is no longer there, this restaurant is no longer there, so things change, but for the time that they're used for those uses, that would make sense to keep an agreement in place.
Okay, and would that agreement be a covenant or?
I can speak to that if you'd like. So the method or the mode that it would take is a cross-access easement agreement. Usually that, or almost always, that is a 3 to 4 page document, just identifying both the properties and the owners of both properties and their heirs, successors, and assigns. Everyone who comes after them just agrees to the flow of traffic between the two lots. The two lots still remain separate entities. They're not merged. They remain their separate tax lots, their separate street addresses. And that is filed in the office of the county clerk. It's indexed against both properties. So any purchasers, lessees down the road will be able to access it. If they go to purchase it, it will be in a title report that cross-access easement is there.
Right.
So,
And in this case, the cross-access is not just access, it's also a requirement for parking spaces in a neighboring property. Is that correct?
Right? Isn't that
not
what
so
we're-
much as the parking, but just the access. As you say, it's number 51 is landlocked.
Yes.
So it really couldn't meet any sort of parking requirements, or it wouldn't be able to have.
Well, it currently doesn't because it's not really.
It's pre-existing
possible.
non-conforming.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could potentially put parking spots back here and require cross-access to get to them. If we were to do that on this property, though,
Mhm.
we would be turning some parking spots into a road and just moving that down, essentially. I don't think that we could get the amount of parking that's required for this property anyway, and we would just end up with more asphalt, which I don't think is
Right.
what we want to do. So, yeah, so I think, I mean, that's the question, is does that mean that I need to provide in perpetuity 15 parking spots for a neighboring property on this property?
No,
No.
no, it's
Gotcha.
just that the patrons of the restaurant would not be restricted, like, that they would be allowed to park there. So there wouldn't have to be a set aside of any number of parking spaces because you're providing more than enough for the theater.
Okay,
So it's not a designated spot. It's really just that, you know, you're not gonna have them towed.
okay, okay. And just so that I understand all the permutations of this, because this is speculative, this is actually happening, as you're all probably aware, there's work going on at the theater now. And if this project stops, the property actually still needs to change hands for this to happen. Would the requirements for the cross access that you're talking about now remain the same? Are you going to require this property to provide parking for this property?
We have to come for us. We've always viewed this as two projects under one umbrella, right? Movie theater, restaurant.
Yes,
And I think your question is, if it's just a movie theater and
Yes.
the restaurant goes away,
yes.
it's just a movie theater, right? And I don't think that we would require that cross access because they're two different projects at
Yes,
this point, unrelated. Right?
yes.
There's no restaurant there. It's still
It's an office.
it's an office and a radio station. So to answer your question, in my view, is no, right? They would be separate projects, right? You know, nothing's happening.
I mean, they are separate projects regardless, I guess.
Right.
Obviously, you can see what I'm trying to understand. Is because I think there is probably a concern. None of us see it, but like right now, that let's say there was a desire to change the ownership of one or the other of these properties in 10 years, maybe that is a complication of trying to change I mean, this is meant to be a nonprofit. I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm just,
Where does the radio station and the office people park now? Not in the movie theater lot. They do park in the movie theater lot. I thought that was
they don't have a lot.
so that, but they're not allowed to park back there now. It's chained
Well-
off, right?
They do. No, it's open and they are parking back there. And I think they park on the street too.
I think we need to think about that. Any other
They're not
views here?
before us. We deal with it when they come before us.
And nobody's getting towed now either. And I'm not suggesting that if this is a restaurant, that's a movie theater, that anybody would start towing people that are at the restaurant either. I just, I'm thinking, you know, in 30 years from now, if there's some issue, because all of a sudden this property is encumbered 15 parking spaces for an adjacent property, that could be a complication.
It's not a specific number of spaces, it's just freedom of movement.
Okay.
Which is, it's a standard condition that the board typically asks for when you have adjoining lots that operate like this.
I have no issue with that.
And something for the board's consideration, I've seen it at least once. There is a concept, future cross access, where something is recorded against the property saying that if an adjoining lot is developed or developed in a certain way at a future point in time, cross access should be provided, just not required at the moment. So that's something that we could explore if the board wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think there's any issue with the cross access itself.
Okay.
That's not the issue. It's the encumbrance of required parking on an adjacent property, basically.
So did we answer your question? Do you have a better idea?
I think it's fine if it's recorded in the fashion that we've discussed here, which is providing the cross access in the fashion that it normally is.
Okay. Pretty good. Good.
So the cross access that you're talking about is there one on the north side too?
For
there's a-
51?
There's a label on, on 51, there's a label that says proposed cross access. Is that a stray label?
Well, this is the north side? Yes. Yeah,
Okay, so
sorry.
there
Just
is
wanna make
one-
sure
there's steps there? or you're
No,
proposing-
it's actually
actually
on
flat.
grade.
Okay.
It's the same elevation. You can walk straight across that entire property boundary.
And I think for purposes of cross-access to what is the Plaza Cafe, just showing it there for now is what we're thinking, right?
Mhm.
And depending on how that project evolves, Southampton Inn expansion,
Up here.
then we can figure out that at this point, you just need to show it.
Yes, if this or this point
Yeah,
should change, we're
Exactly.
certainly open to making adjustments there.
exactly.
I don't know how quickly that project will move. Our goal is to try to actually start this physical construction in the fall
Yeah, okay.
after the season in the back.
But I think those are the three issues for us, the cross-access, both with the restaurant, but also with Southampton Inn,
Yes.
the landscaping, which it seems like you've addressed. And I think that was it, right? John, that was, right? Yeah, okay.
Okay. It's a moment for public comment.
Anybody want to comment? on
Anyone,
this?
any public comment on this? Mr. Bennett?
My name is John. Her name is Bennett.
Reed. I represent the owners of 71 Hill Street. Last week, we were before the trustees seeking a modification of an approved zone change for 40 resort hotel units with a 20% workforce set aside, which is something that trustees have been very supportive of. But what has been a little bit of a concern, I don't think anybody has a problem. It's great to see the movie theater back. But I do have a bit of a concern about the lack of coordination speaking about coordinated access. I had hoped that there'd be a call from the applicant the last time I was here when the board was on for discussion. So, I mean, I don't have any problem with closing the public hearing, but subject to keeping it open to working out this coordinated access issue. Because the owner of the property, I mean, coordinated access is, there's a case law in the second department. You just don't get coordinated access because you ask for it. There has to be a demonstration for it. So actually, there's a pending lawsuit because there was a request for coordinated access and coordinated parking. I think we've got to the point where probably the applicant is more than willing to talk about coordinated access, but not coordinated parking. So I think we can get there with 71 Hill. I'm very, very optimistic, and the movie theater and whatever is going to become with this other parcel. But the owner should talk about it.
We did reach out and we were told that there was no desire for cross-access.
No. What you did, and I worked with your
Before
firm.
the-
I've worked with
before
your firm. Let me finish.
Before the last
Let
meeting.
me finish, please. I worked with your firm, Jürgen Rehm, and I've worked on
Sure.
a bunch of projects.
Yes.
Great guy and everything. I did at the last meeting suggest that someone reach out. There was never been a suggestion that there was no desire for coordinated access. Quite the contrary, our plan before the trustees shows it. So I would just encourage you to give me a call. There may not be any tension between the projects, but we have to figure out where each side wants to have the coordinated access, and God willing, we'll come to it at the same place. But it would be foolish not to have the discussions between the owners to make sure that it works for both parcels. That's all.
Agreed.
That's all. So, I mean, I don't have any problem to closing the hearing, but as long as it's subject to our being able to give further input with your applicant here about where the coordinated access should go.
So I can't get GIS up. Your client is the La Carreza property, correct?
No,
Or the-
no.
It's the 71 Hill Street. It's the Southampton Inn is on one side, and the Plaza Cafe.
Okay, all right.
That's
I'm
where
just
the building
orienting
department
myself.
used to be many years ago, and the building's up front.
And the radio station.
Excuse me?
And the radio station.
That's a separate.
No,
I think
don't
that
it's
site borders it the whole way.
Radio station.
I can't get
Both
GIS up. So your concern is not so much in the concept of cross access, just where it's placed.
Absolutely,
Okay.
it should make sense, and even should talk about the other small lot, which.
Well,
Yeah, and we're open to that.
okay.
Yeah,
The
give us a
one-
call. Give me a
yeah,
call.
The
We can-
cross-access between the future Southampton and the cross-access is going to be a major issue.
As I said, I don't think we have a problem with the cross access. Cross parking, and I've had discussions about it's another thing. We're absolutely opposed to cross parking because we're the parking works for the Southampton
Yeah.
Inn. But cross-access makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you can get through, you could actually, if everybody agrees, you could actually be able to get from Windmill Lane to the 71 Hill without going on
Right,
Windmill Lane or Hill Street.
right. And cross-access for both applications is going to be a major issue for the planning board, so you guys should talk.
Yeah, no,
happy
that's
to
all I'm
do
saying. That's all I'm saying. We don't have any opposition to the concept of it. It's just where it goes because it has to make sense.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
So that'd be great.
And-
So how do we deal with that? 'Cause-
Just, John, for the record, we understand that where that is somewhat in flux right now.
Not really.
Right.
No.
Well-
no. That's not. I'm sort of frustrated. There's a site plan and a full plan and drawings and floor plans before the trustees right now. It's not in a state of flux. We have prevented what we are willing to do, and we had a wonderful meeting with the trustees. So the 40 transient units, not transient, 40 resort hotel units in a new building designed by John David Rose. And then there are 2 buildings up front. One of them is going to be, as it stands now, 8 workforce housing units, and the other will remain as it is. So the trustees are extremely supportive of it, and we're willing to go forward with that. So it's
you
not in a
guys have
state of
to-
flux. Excuse me?
Sorry, you guys have to agree on where that's exactly going to be located.
Yeah, I think that might be one meeting.
Okay, all right, because we're not going to,
Does your site plan in front of the trustees now have?
Yeah, but you have to, Mark, to the extent that you're gonna land the access somewhere, you have to be involved in it.
right, but we're not going to referee it. You guys have to agree. It's got to work for both parties. It's not
So
up to
how do
us
we deal
to.
with this? Because I have no opposition whatsoever to closing the meeting. Everyone's thrilled that the theater is coming back in, but I don't want to be forestalled if we can't come to some, about further input, if we can't come to some agreement as to the
I think what-
location.
Sorry, well, I think we discussed not closing the public hearing on the theater and the restaurant.
I mean, I don't have any problem with it
I
as
think
long.
we're going to leave it open.
I
the
would
board's
actually be
discretion.
supportive
So
of it.
mostly because I don't want the shot clock to start ticking on us.
So if you'd like to leave it open, we could just look into cross-access, proposed future cross-access.
And that's the only issue we have. Everybody's
Look,
very supportive of this plan.
Can we roll this to the next, you guys have 2 weeks to get together on this. Can we roll this to the next meeting? And hopefully you guys have reached agreement by then, and then we can close the public hearing.
Again, I don't have any problem with closing the hearing. I would be supportive of that.
Yeah.
I just want to have a mechanism so that we can have continued dialogue about where the cross-access is going to land. I don't think you're prohibited from closing the hearing if that's issue is still going to be on the table.
Yeah, I think we talked about that actually last time I was here.
About-
It's up to you, but I'm just not trying to. I'm trying not to hold this project up. You know, that's all.
Two, or just keep it open.
Your advice on this, close the public hearing?
So if you close the public hearing, you have the 41-day shot clock for the site plan
Yeah.
for us to make a determination on the site plan.
Yeah. And draft a resolution.
Correct. And then similar to what we did with Buzz Chew, then there's another 41-day clock if we make the resolution conditioned upon anything in which the applicant will have to satisfy those conditions.
Do you have a problem if we leave this public hearing open until the 15th?
No, I'm happy to come back that day, and I will try to resolve this before then. That's fine. As I said, we'd like to try to start this work outside when the season closes, which is probably less than 80 days away. So,
I mean, I'm
but
speaking to the
I'm
applicant
happy
right
to
now,
try
but
to make an effort
Yeah.
to resolve this before, if that can compress the
If I
rest
could
of it.
ask you both.
I'm trying to be a good
Sure.
neighbor here, really. And if the only thing that's holding it up, as long as we are able to have input on that issue, I don't. If that's the only thing that would be holding you from closing the public hearing and letting these people go on their way, I don't have a problem with it. I just want to be able to have input on the access. That doesn't have to take the form necessarily of in the context of a public hearing.
Understood. Let's do this. If you guys can come back on the 15th and let us know what you've agreed to, or come, and then we'll,
Or not.
or not,
Yeah,
and then
but
we'll,
hopefully we have.
we'll
Yeah.
make a decision then.
Figure something
Okay.
out.
And in the event that something is that you two reach an agreement as to where you certainly want the easement or where
Yeah.
both parties agree to it, you can place it on the site plan.
Of course.
it can be plotted there, and then we can go on our way from
Yeah,
there.
so we'll try to resolve it this week so I can update the drawings. Yeah, it's good. I do. We'll see where we get.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Any other
if you have any further questions, or is everything? Do you understand kind of where we're our posture?
I think so.
Okay.
Is it possible, will we see the draft of the cross-access document before it's ratified? Or?
that's what we were just discussing. I think we'll draft that and have it ready to go. So if you guys can come together between now and the next meeting, then we can close the public hearing, move forward very quickly.
Do you have counsel that you're working with that would review?
Yes,
Okay,
they
all
would
right,
like to.
excellent. Okay.
So we can get it all done on the 15th, assuming there's a meeting of the minds.
Perfect.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I want to check if there's any other public comment before we formally adjourn.
Any other public comment on either of these applications? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
So we got a motion to adjourn to the July 15th meeting?
Yeah, motion to adjourn this to July 15th, please. Second? Thank you, Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next on the agenda is RRFACF. Let me just run, because I'm not sure there's much else, and I know you've got a presentation for us, and I want to save that, Jen. Let me just run through the other things, because I don't think we have much else or many other people here. And then we'll get to you guys. Okay, so just bear with us 1 second. Connemara and 52 First Neck, we got the letter. So we're going to adjourn that until the letter requested August, I think.
We said September.
September.
Chris is very busy, so
Yeah.
I don't want to push him.
Okay, so we'll, a motion to adjourn Connemara until, Bill, when is it?
So
September?
moved.
September 16th. Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 865 Merrick is adjourned to July 15th. Brian Kelly is adjourned to July 15th. 74 White Street. Anyone here for that? Motion to adjourn that until our next meeting on the 15th.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
36 Windmill Lane. Anyone here on that one? So, motion to adjourn that until July 15th, in which case we'll have that public hearing second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone else here on anything? No? Okay. RRFACF.
It's John Bennett, the applicant, and Rich Warren is here with me, and of course, Mr. Farrell. So I did submit, there were some discussions, I did submit a proposed agricultural easement. We brought Rob Carpenter from the Long Island Farm Bureau here this evening, who has a wealth of knowledge about this stuff. I thought it might not be a bad idea to allow him to talk generally about agriculture, because just the whole idea of it's not open space, it's ag open space. So it's something that, when I was a youngster, where Stop and Shop is now, I guess it was A&P, and then it was Wallbaum's and Stop and Shop. That was an active farm. There were other active farms in the village of Southampton. But this is really, is that probably the last active farm, would you say, in the village? There's a few. But they're not, there used to be, and Alan will tell you this, and I can tell you this as well, there used to be active, quite a few more active farms in the village. And if you look at the master plan, it talks about encouraging that active farming. So I thought it'd be nice if you'll indulge us and have Mr. Carpenter just talk a little bit about active farming.
We'd love to hear from Mr. Carpenter, but before we do that, I need a motion to reopen the record so that we can hear
of
from
course.
Mr.
Thank you.
Carpenter. So
Thank you.
do I have a second for that, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then after Mr. Carpenter is finished, maybe we can try to do some business here, but.
Perfect.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Carpenter.
Where would you like me to sit?
Anyway,
In front of
The
the
microphone
the
helps.
microphone, I think.
Table?
Um,
You're more comfortable.
you want to
If
be
you're more
recorded?
comfortable at the table, we'll just move a microphone so you can be
You can be
heard.
recorded.
I'm getting
Oh, there's one right there,
older
yeah.
and standing a long time.
It's fine.
Well, thank you all for having me. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Rob Carpenter, and I'm the director of Long Island Farm Bureau. And we are a county farm bureau that represents the agricultural interest on Long Island. And I thought first I'd give you a little bit of an overview about agriculture and what it means here on Long Island, and maybe then talk a little bit about farmland preservation before I get into some of the other issues that are going to come up. So in Suffolk County, there actually is approximately 35,000 acres of farmland still left. And believe it or not, we are the fourth largest agricultural county in New York State in terms of dollar volumes that we produce and gross sales. Farmers in Suffolk County produce, as of the 2022 agricultural census, $364 million annually. So we still have quite a bit of agriculture left in Suffolk County, and our farmers are still doing a pretty tremendous job of production. Here in the county, we grow just about everything that you can grow that our climate allows. We still have a number of potato and vegetable farmers, fruit farmers. We have a very large and growing wine industry with about 60 wineries in Suffolk County. Horse farms are still considered agriculture that are part of our mission. Horticulture is our largest crop, and here in Suffolk County, about 60% of the state's horticulture industry is right here in Suffolk County. That includes nursery stock, flowers, greenhouses, sod farms, which there are about 3,000 acres of sod still produced here, maybe even a little bit more. And unique things such as hemp as a new crop. We have things such as mushroom farms. And one of the new resurgent crops that was big in the late 1800s, early 1900s, oyster production. And through the Suffolk County Aquaculture Lease Program, there's probably about 40 to 50 oyster farmers that are making a resurgence and growing oysters for the fresh market. So we really have a lot to be thankful and grateful for, because agriculture is still a pretty big area for us in Suffolk County. It makes up about 5% of the land mass. In Suffolk County, we were the very first county in the United States to actually preserve farmland. The very first piece in 1977, the Talmadge property in Calverton was the very first piece of farmland, and that actually is still being farmed today, approximately 80 acres, and it's in greenhouses, pumpkins, and sod production. So the program is working. Of the 35,000 acres of farmland that we have here, there's approximately 23,000 that are preserved for agriculture in perpetuity, meaning the development rights have been stripped off and the land is specifically dedicated to agricultural production. And as Mr. Bennett alluded to, agriculture production is completely different than open space. And we feel and believe that agriculture production or preserved farmland is a working lands program. And it's incumbent upon all of us to allow for farmers to be able to farm that land. There are components and other programs specifically for open space, which is a different set of circumstances that really rely on the natural state of the land, generally growing up into trees or grasses or whatever the ecosystem allows for. But farmland is a working lands program. One of the things that we believe in when it comes to farmland and farmland preservation is that we can preserve all of the land that we want, but if there's no farmers to farm the land, what good does it do? So we look at farmland preservation and the sustainability of agriculture as being sustainable to the farmers, because they are the key that allows for all of this to happen, whether it's the environmental use of the land, whether it's the economic use of the land. The farmers really are the original stewards of the land. So we hold them in high regard. And as we as citizens go about our daily business, whether it's eating every meal, every piece of food that we put in our mouth starts on a farm. Whether we enjoy a cocktail after work, or we enjoy having certain types of clothing, that all comes from agriculture and the basis of ag production. So to us, it's pretty important what farmers do here. Farmers, however, face many challenges, and the economics of farming is constantly evolving and changing. When we think back when I was growing up, potatoes and cabbage and cauliflower and strawberries were really the main crops grown here in Suffolk County. But markets change. People stopped eating traditional family meals and have gone more towards prepared foods that they might buy from a store or go out for restaurants, which is all wonderful. But it's rare now that families eat 7 meals a day at home prepared in a traditional way, like when I was growing up. So the changing has allowed for or forced farmers to say, you know what, I can't make it growing wholesale potatoes and sending them into Hunts Point Market. I have to find a way to economically survive. So farmers started transitioning in the mid-'80s to things like nursery production, greenhouses, wine grapes. The Hargraves were the first vineyard in 1977, 72. Let's see, it's been 50 years, so 74 really is about that time. Tremendous family that really started a completely new industry. But that was a result of changing economics and changing times. And as we go forward, we don't know what the future is going to bring. Today, farmers face incredible regulations from DEC, from Ag and Markets, from Suffolk County, from health departments, local towns and villages. They don't have it easy. And when you look at who they're competing against, the market is people, farmers in Pennsylvania, farmers in Ohio, farmers in upstate New York, Connecticut, where they have different economic factors but can easily put food into New York City, the same as our farmers. So with the highest minimum wage, or one of them in the nation, with regulations, it's getting pretty hard for farmers to compete on a level playing field. And that's something that we worry about. And that's why we try to encourage people, the public, to buy local, but also boards like yourselves to take that into consideration when working with farmers to say, okay, we understand what you're going through. Let's make sure that you have the ability to survive and to keep going into the future. We look at climate change and what's happening in the world. We look at water shortages in the West. We look at farms in California and Arizona that are leaving those states and moving south of the border to Mexico and into other places because of cheaper costs of doing business. How are we going to survive in the world if farmland continues to be converted without thought to the future? And that's why these preservation programs are so important. One of the reports that I always focus on is the United Nations Biodiversity Report. And in that report, it says by 2050, the world has to produce 50% more food to feed what the population will be at that time. So imagine increasing food production by 50% just to be able to continue to be able to feed ourselves. Where is all that coming from and how are we going to do it? So we're faced with some pretty big challenges in our industry. Here in New York, we're pretty fortunate. The state constitution specifically recognizes the development of agricultural lands. And I won't read the whole section, but I'll tell you, Article 14, Section 4 of the state constitution. The policy of the state shall be to conserve and protect its natural resources and scenic beauty, and encourage the development and improvements of its agricultural lands for the production of food and agricultural products. So the residents of New York really thought long and hard about what agriculture means to them. And as a result of that, this document, which is the Department of Ag and Markets, Article 25AA, details what farmers can and can't do in New York State and provides great protection for them. This is something that we really respect, and we believe in ag and markets being the safeguard for our farms here. What does the future bring for agriculture? We really don't know. But I do know that farmers need the ability to transition, much as they did 25, 30, 40 years ago, to whatever is going to happen in the future. What is the ability for farmers going to be able to grow food, to have agricultural labor here to do the work in the fields, to be able to have different pieces of technology? And we look at things such as vertical farming, growing things such as food, lettuces, and our food products in greenhouses, much as they do in Holland, where they have tremendous greenhouse industry. What new types of food, what biodiverse types of food will we need to produce? That's all the things that we need to think about and encourage as we go forward in the future and allow for production on our preserved farmland to be able to go forward to feed our residents. There's a lot more that I could talk about: estate taxes, the pressures of the environment, the public's desire to tell farmers what to do and how to do it, to tell them how to use their land. As we get into suburbia and people moving out from New York City and making the trek further east, we find a lot of pressure from people saying, we don't want you to do this instead because we like that better. Farming is not about vistas. Farming is about preserving and growing the products that we need in order to survive. And we should always remember that as we go forward in the future. So I've probably talked too much, but I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have. Please, I'm here for you.
Thank you. Questions?
I've got lots of useless knowledge.
Bill, any questions? I had a couple questions.
Please.
You said Suffolk County is the fourth largest in ag dollars in New York State. Do you break it down by acreage, though?
You mean as far as crops grown?
Yeah.
I know the ag census doesn't break it down specifically, but I can give you the 4 or 5 biggest crops unless you're looking for something specific.
Per acre.
So my impression is that the crops that are grown in at least this area are non-food crops that are profitable nursery stock plants. And I'm just trying to get an idea, is it a high dollar volume on low acreage, or is it's not, that's not the way farm people look at it?
Well, I would say the statistics that the ag census puts forth is based upon gross sales. So meaning farm gate for what farmers sell.
Yep.
However, in this particular area, and I'm going to say, let's say the town of Southampton, if
Yep.
that's okay, there's actually quite a lot of food production, believe it or not, that happens. But farmers here, as I mentioned, don't put it into a truck and send it off. They sell in ways towards local consumers. So they sell at farm stands. They do value-added products to promote their products for sale. They do some wholesaling to other farm stands
Yep.
because it's impossible to grow 40 different crops for a farm stand.
Right.
But there is nursery production, and there are equine horses we consider to be agriculture. We do have a couple of vineyards in the town of Southampton.
But do you break it down between food and non-food?
There is no
there's-
such.
and
There
there's
is no
no-
such.
No statistic.
Yeah, just they don't get that specific.
Is there data on, I'm not sure I'm going to ask this correctly, so bear with me.
Go ahead.
But is there a data, or do you have a view on farming for profit on the East End, or farming as a hobby, and how that breaks down? Where farms are actually commercially viable businesses that are the primary source of income for a farmer.
Sure, that's a great question, and that kind of alludes back to the economics of agriculture. Many farmers are commercial. There are a few, and it's different segmented, different segments. So we do have some new beginning farmers and existing farmers that are trying to farm small farms, maybe 5 or 10 acres, doing local vegetables, doing value added. We do have a large number of family farms that are maybe, and I'll use the Fowlers as an example, that have been here for hundreds of years. The Fosters, the Krzyzewskis. On the North Fork, we have the Schmidts and the Rotkamps and the Andersons from the North Fork and Riverhead. So it's a combination of both. But because of the economics, what we see more is farmers working the fields and maybe a spouse having an outside job to bring in extra money, or farmers working in the fields but having a farm market where the spouse works to bring in the retail dollars, because they can't make it just selling wholesale, so they need that value added or that cutting out of the middleman to be able to survive. So it's a unique dynamic, and every farm is different.
Understood.
I'll give you just one quick story. A good friend of mine who's a potato grower, and I don't think he'd mind me sharing this, Marty Sider, said, when my grandfather was farming and he had a good year, he would buy farmland, more land. When my parents had a good year, they would go out and buy some extra equipment. He says, when I have a good year, I'm able to pay all my bills. And I think that kind of really sums up the state of what agriculture is about today.
Yeah. What is the Farm Bureau's view on code provisions that prevent certain aspects of farming, like the current village code prohibits animal husbandry? What's your view on that?
We know that it can be very difficult because you have a number of people who come out, they do buy property. From a restriction standpoint, we are opposed to municipalities saying, you know, we need to restrict this, we need to ban these certain crops, because it's a never-ending cycle, because somebody doesn't like animal husbandry, but then somebody doesn't like this crop, or somebody wants to see only food production, or somebody wants to see this. And as time goes by, that ability for the farmer to transition is harder and harder as time goes by. And you know, the ironic thing is what we're seeing on the North Fork is more grass-fed beef, where you have 20 or 30 head of cattle grazing in a field. Beautiful and pristine. Again, food production, but we're seeing the resurgence of small animal production in that instance.
If I were to have 20 or 30 head of cattle and I needed to sustain that, how large of a farm would I need? Isn't it like one cow per X acres? Isn't that like, isn't there
It depends. So in the old, I'm saying in the old days,
Yeah.
it used to be about an animal per acre, but nowadays with the ability to bring in food, grasses, or silage or something along those lines, you could really do, I'd say about an animal per acre is a pretty fair best guess.
Last question I had was, talk to me about dust management and what do you guys recommend when you're doing these presentations on how important that is and how to best achieve that?
Sure. Well, I think the part of the answer is farmers truly are stewards of the land, and they understand that preservation of topsoil is one of the key things. And we need to remember that there are farms that are in existence for hundreds of years, every year growing a crop. So the stewardship of those prime soils is key. Farmers use many different things such as windrows or blockages to prevent the wind from coming and blowing the dust. They work with the Soil and Water Conservation District to do best soil health practices, putting organic matter back into the soils to ensure that they don't deplete the land. So they can do a little bit of composting and add that nutrient-rich material back into the soils. But wind and erosion is a big enemy of the farmers, and they need to do everything possible to prevent that dust and wind from blowing. In addition, it also is a nuisance to the neighbors. Farmers generally don't want to have neighbors call them up complaining about dust or other things.
How is it typically done? I mean, do I need a 30-foot hedge, or do I need a 2-foot hedge, or do I need any hedge for dust?
Well, I'll answer that in two parts, because one of the things that farmers face tremendous pressure on is deer. Deer.
Yep.
We have more deer than we know what to do with here. So many farmers utilize deer fencing, but to have a 6, 8, or 10-foot privet, either privet row, hedge row, arborvitaes, is absolutely another way that farmers use that to prevent the wind from coming in and blowing away the dust.
So as I drive around this area, right, I see, there's still some large farms, and you see very different approaches to the dust management. And I'm just trying to determine which is the right approach and why certain farms do it this way and other, some farms have no hedge, no dust management. Some farms have a 2-foot hedge. Some farms have a 8 or 10-foot hedge. How did that evolve?
It depends upon the individual farmer and their practices, to be quite honest with you. There's many different ways to do it, but generally the hedgerows are something that we encourage if a farmer needs it, it's about what the farmer and the management practice of the farm needs, not just what Farm Bureau or Rob Carpenter says, oh, you should do it this way. It
But-
really is
But
up to the
there's no
farmer.
industry standard for that is what I'm driving at. It's sort of what farm management practices, which is all lowercase. I'm assuming that's not a defined term. There's no booklet on farm management practices specific to this topic.
Soil and Water and the Natural Resources Conservation Service may have something. I'm not a soil health
Yep.
management expert,
Yep.
if you know what I'm saying. So I would defer to those experts first and foremost.
And is it typically done around the entire perimeter of a property, or is it prevailing wind focused?
It could be any,
Could be either.
it could be any or all of the above.
Got it.
And again, there's many reasons why a farmer would choose to put up a blockade of some sort. So again, that's an individual farmer's right to use their land as any of us use our land and decide what to do with it.
Understood. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Any other questions?
Thank you, boy. I've got a son who's an active cattle farmer.
How
I
many?
had 750 head on 100,000 acres for 20 years. I worked the land. It was 100 acres a head. I was an expert in the broiler business, in the lettuce business,
Really?
in the in the shredding of lettuce to get across the country. I've sold broiler farms. I've sold turkey farms. I've got more. It's a wonderful, complex thing. I've got children and grandchildren who've gone drunk on horses, which is the greatest racket in the world. I got more experience.
Got a lot of farm stories.
I've gone back. I've sold apartments I didn't want to sell just to pay for the goddamn horses. I mean, I've got every episode, so I'm an expert. So I'm not gonna tell any active farmer to thank God you're doing it, but I'm gonna root for you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. Mr. Bennett knows how to reach me, and I'm happy to come back or have further conversations at any point.
And
Thank you.
some of your farmers out in Suffolk County, they've made great golf courses. There are lots of
If
uses.
you're, and again,
It's a big decision for regular people. Is the golf course legitimate or not, or is it better than farm? I mean, this is wonderful stuff to do.
and many of the sod growers here
Oh, fabulous.
sell to the
Yep.
golf courses, and if you're
The sod growers sell to people who put the grass on the beach and wonder why the mosquitoes come. Come
Well,
on,
that,
it's a
but
great business.
if you're a baseball fan, the sod on the Yankee Stadium
Yep.
comes right from Suffolk County from
Really?
one of our farmers. So
Thank you again.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So before I start talking about what we're here to talk about, and Alan will excuse me, I do have a very appropriate anecdote to tell, given Alan's knowledge of cattle and farming. I was lucky enough to be taking a tour of the Highlands of Scotland some years ago, and I noticed the name McFarlane on a sign somewhere, and I said to my guide, who was quite literally wearing a kilt, McFarlane, the gentleman I know back home, his name is McFarlane. He goes, and he said to me, McFarlane, every one of them cattle thieves. As a matter of fact, to this day in Scotland, we call a full moon a McFarlane lantern. So it's probably genetic, Alan. Pardon my butchering of the Scottish accent. I tried my best. So I don't know where the board wants to go. We did have a meeting with the chairman and Mr. Borkwin and the mayor and the village attorney and Mr. Warren, Mr. Fowler and the building inspector and myself, not to make any decisions, but just trying to flesh out what the issues were that remained. Should we talk about those, or Mark, what would you like to do? Do you want to digest what you heard this evening?
I think we'd like to digest what we've heard
Okay.
this evening. I think I want to summarize a little bit. number one priority for the board, I believe, is to push along a sketch plan approval so that you can take this to the next step. And I think without going into a detailed postmortem, we got a little bit off that track, but we're trying to steer things back on that track to where we have seen a preliminary sketch plan. I think that you know, most of us either comfortable or very close to being comfortable with that, and could move forward on a preliminary sketch plan approval very quickly. And I think, and what we've heard from you all is, you know, you like that approach. That's the approach that's been done, you know, for as long as you've been practicing or living out here. I'd like to steer it back to that precedent or to that tradition. And I think that as we start to open up other issues that we've kind of gotten out over our skis a little bit or gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit on this, can only serve to slow that top priority down. Right now, I'm certainly not saying that there aren't different ways to skin the cat here, but I think what the message that we're getting from the applicant here is, you know, that's the driving force. You want to move forward on this, and the best way to move forward on this is to get a sketch plan approval so that you can start doing a secret review, so you can start doing SWIP, so you can talk to the health department and get going on this. We want to digest this, so that's kind of directionally where I think we want to lead this. Tell me if you have, or if you all have a different agenda,
Well,
and if so, you know, how much time do you want to spend on that? Because I
Well-
think it's hard to make certain decisions until we've got the complete picture in front of us.
well, let me respond. If this had been a year and a half ago, I would be saying, yeah, that's what you should be doing,
Yep.
because typically that's how long a sketch plan takes. But we're 2 years from now, and there's a lot of toothpaste out of the tube, and there's been a lot of discussion. So we have certain issues that we've talked about, and given the fact that those have been in discussion for some time, the tension is, do you just approve the map? Because that's what the sketch plan says, the map right here. You would just have a resolution. I mean, every sketch plan, the last sketch plan we did, the resolution just approved the map. And because, remember, it's sketch plan, then preliminary, and then final. So we just approved the map, and I think the resolution said the map is approved. And the only condition was, I think the name of the owner was incorrect. That was literally the only condition on it, and that was a two-lot subdivision over here. So that's a possibility. I guess what I'd have to talk about was we had so many conversations about the language of the ag covenant, restrictions on privet, the access into here, and park fee issues, and whether or not all those things, if we in effect got away on that, would we be willing to talk about access to the pond if the village wasn't able to work it out with anybody else? I mean, those issues are all on the table. They've been discussed and discussed and discussed. There's been memorandums of law. We've been back and forth with the lawyers on it. You don't have a resolution of approval, right?
No, nothing drafted for
So
tonight.
it's,
No.
the question becomes, there is some benefit to finally putting those issues to bed. Because they're just gonna come up again on the preliminary application. So I guess what I'd like to do is I don't think you're not in a position, you don't have a resolution of approval. I think you listen to what Rob said. I think that should hopefully inform the language in the covenant. I did take some specific animals, for lack of better description, out of there. I do want to say, by the way, animal husbandry is a term of art. Animal husbandry is growing your own animals. It's not just having animals on the property. I'm trying to be gentle about it, but animal husbandry includes things like artificial insemination of the animals, and it includes actually having a farm where you breed these things. So, but having said all of that, I think I'd like you to think about the possibility of these items that we have talked about, including a sketch plan approval that adds finality to those things. And on the other hand, we'll talk about whether or not we simply go forward with a resolution which would essentially be a one-sentence resolution, approve this map, the sketch plan. That may be the way to go. Let me see how the client feels.
So why don't we do this? Let me propose this. We'll digest the information we heard today. Why don't we adjourn to the July 15th and decide, we'll all know kind of what we want at that point, and we can talk then and decide which way we're going to go.
Would it be okay if I liaise with John? Presumably you'll be talking to John about these things?
Yep.
'Cause one of the things that's been frustrating for me is I only get to talk to all of you at this one meeting, and then 2 weeks go by when some of these things we could maybe check off the list on some of them. But if you would feel free to talking to John so that he and I can liaise.
I would encourage that.
Great.
And just for my own edification, so I know we discussed the option or the possibility of just a
You okay with that?
one paragraph resolution approving map last dated so-and-so.
Right.
Because
leaving everything open.
as a practitioner myself, I know the health department, you want to get on that as soon as you
Sure.
can. I've been in front of it for 2 years on one project that I'm on. Would option B, if that does not work or we don't all agree to that, be something like we've been attempting to get to, a sketch plan approval resolution that
Some conditions.
gives conditions with some degree of specificity? Is that something that you're
Yeah,
comfortable with?
obviously, I'm comfortable with that. We'd all have to agree on the conditions. But I think maybe if we could talk about that. You've started it a couple of times. I've had some comments on it. I drafted a full ag reserve document, which tried to take into account some of the concerns people had about certain types of animals. I mean, I think it would be great, since so much of this is out on the table, just to hammer it down and get it done. But I hear where some of the board members are going on the other methodology. Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about it. I'm not trying to close down any possibility. I appreciate the fact that you want to move this along. It just seems to me there's been so much conversation about some of these items. We might as well resolve them. I don't think the issues are going to be any different on a preliminary application. So
I agree with you, and I think the benefit is that we've gotten all of the issues out on the table.
that's true.
right,
That is true.
early.
Yeah,
right?
that's
so
very
everyone
true.
knows,
Yeah.
kind of what everyone's
That's very
rough
true.
position, and I think that's very valuable. So that my view is that when we get to the next step 2 of this process, that things can go quickly because everybody's already up the curve. I think, and I'm speaking for myself,
Yeah.
not the board. I think the most challenging hurdle for us to get over are the details and specifics of the ag reserve document and language, and I think that it will be difficult to not negotiate, but I think that it will be difficult to reach agreement on between now and the 15th.
Okay,
And
let me
if
talk.
If
Let
you
me
guys
talk.
are in a hurry,
Yeah.
right? I want to put that on your radar screen so you're not surprised if that does slow us down. Before
But
you
I do want to talk about some of the stuff that we put in here, which was obviously for any buildings going back to the planning board, which is not something in the village code. We put that in there. The board was concerned about that. That's not just changes. That's new buildings, and we looked at other ag reserves, but
I think,
I have to be honest with you. Typically, every one of these ag easements that I've drafted, both as a municipal lawyer, they're not terribly different. They're really not terribly different.
Let me say, John, and I have a very few personal goals which govern this. I've shared them with a lot of people. I've shared them with other people in the room. I have just a few goals. I would like to control the costs of Ricky and his mother at this effort. This is an expensive sport, and I really want to control their costs, number one. Number two, I absolutely want to move it ahead as much as possible. I was a direct victim by a spouse of the inability of her and her siblings to have horses in the village. Period. There are no horses in the village. Okay, if you put in horses, there's a lot of issues. The village, to my knowledge, and you guys may be wrong, and Mr. Borkin will tell me, the village, as opposed to the town, don't have ag reserves. There are very few farms left in the village. I think I know four of them, for the still farming up on the, still some farming up on the corner by Mr. Halsey. But there's four of them, and for the village, this little 6 mile bundle, it's a scarce resource, and our duty from applicants is to look at what's left and make decisions for heirs, successors, and assigns. People may not be here. If Ricky and his brother and his mother want to continue what they're doing, it's fine with me. Absolutely will do it. The whole question is, what's next? Walking on water is easy after the first step. But what's next? You tabled something. You're an artful practitioner. Your style is to always do, not the extreme, but to represent your clients with a style that a lot of us, represent, and you do it well. But there's a lot of stuff in there. You didn't put llamas in. Okay, fine. That's not what we're talking about. Animal husbandry. I know about animal husbandry. I studied once it was the University of Oklahoma in multiplying the productivity of animals like they do with humans now, which was illegal in Alabama or something. I've been through all that stuff. Hey, it's a great sport, but with what's left, Ricky and his brother and his mother, they're screwed because there's just a little bit of farmland left. And they have other farmland that's probably going to be great, just as we heard. It's really good. Rob they'll be great. But the barn happens to be in the center of it, and it's used for the other farms. And it's not. And Ricky doesn't drive the tractor every day. He's got good help that do the other farms. And it's we have to deal with the relationship between what's left in the village, and at least to my knowledge, 2 other major parcels. And I think both of the family's advisors are involved in those other parcels, or they should be. That'll be efforts for taxes, for everything, for the town as opposed to the village of Southampton. But just to say, the second step, we can just move routinely. The complexities, we don't want them, but these issues come to, we're dealing with the last little bit of land left in the village that's not residential or paved. It's a burden with the planning, with everything else. And you mentioned the magic words, park, and all that. That's a moving target too. We're sitting here with the change of what comes to us by the village trustees. And there's going to be votes in the fall.
That's been overly complicated and misunderstood.
No, but it comes at us to reflect those in the judgments we have to make. We'd like to control Ricky's costs as soon as he can and get everything possible to move as soon as it can.
Okay.
And we'll deal with this other stuff in due course. And we could do it overnight, but it's difficult. Oh yeah, he's the victim. You're just attorney. He's the applicant. He's the guy we're worried about.
I got a great team, but I appreciate what you're saying. But we're almost 2 years into this, and we can't keep kicking it down the road. Trying to control costs your board keeps putting stuff on us that we've gone a great deal of time and money to mitigate and to address these things, only to hear now, oh, let's just deal with it later. I don't like that. We've done that. We've addressed this. This ag easement that we proposed, the Farm Bureau has graciously looked at it, has given us advice on what to put in there to be consistent with other farms across the county. There's a lot of useful things in here. So I don't think there's harm in trying to utilize this document and getting to a resolution and to including it.
We'll do it. But if that's what you want, we'll take the
But-
time and do it.
From our standpoint, we're not far off. So unless you guys say that we are, then, we need some guidance here.
I don't think we're far off, but I don't think you're gonna get what you're asking for by July 15th, at the next meeting. I could be wrong, because we've got some work to do in the next 2 weeks, but
And then what
in
about
terms
the
of
other sticking
expectations.
points in the document that were in there? Are we gonna agree to remove them permanently? Are they gonna come up at the 12th hour? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because there's a lot of concerns. So like,
What's sticking? Give me.
so,
Give me
the
the
closing of the
sticking-
main driveway, there's a lot of issues with that. Main one being fire access. The fire hydrant's directly across the street.
Yeah.
All my
okay.
fire loads there. When are we gonna address that? Because to us, that can't get closed, that can't change. So
It may have
are
to
we
be-
going to agree that that's
if-
coming off?
If
You
we
know,
can agree
that's-
that it can be adjusted as opposed to closed, the magic word
Well,
is closed.
Actually,
Okay,
let's
it
talk
can
about
be
that.
adjusted. That's fine.
Because we have yet to understand why anyone would want to move that access. We've spoken to the preeminent traffic consultant out here, Dunn Engineering.
Who is that?
Done.
He's Dunn Engineering.
Ron Hill?
Yeah, Ron Hill.
He's my
The
friend.
site distance is the best here. If you bring it down here, you've got movement that you're going to have traffic impacting on a closer ingress and egress, which makes no sense. There are tractor trailer deliveries
Right.
that we now, with the existing the way it's set up, we can keep them on the site as opposed to parking them off the site. So there's a lot of these things that make, literally, we haven't been able to find any rationale that would suggest why this should be closed. The privet along the side, you've heard Mr. Carpenter talk about why that's necessary in a typical farm practice.
And just respectfully though, this is the way it's operated for the last hundreds of years.
Yes.
So trying to change it now for lack of better terms, no good reason, right? So someone's thoughts that think by changing it will make it better, it's operated this way with no problems.
And there's been no, we've
There's
asked
been
them
no
to
traffic
release
there's been no
traffic
accidents,
incidents.
there's no injuries. And I mean, you can ask Rob, I mean, this is how farms operate and this is how it's set up to work for us. A lot of thought has gone into it. When we installed the deer fence, we set it way back off the road to avoid tractor trailers getting stuck in the middle of the road and causing a traffic hazard. So a lot of thought has gone into it, which, the regular public, they might not know. But as I guess you could say, a professional farmer, that's all into consideration. And we're trying to do the best for the land and the community
The other
and
thing
to preserve what we have.
The other thing everyone should be aware of, and Mr. Halsey told me that I was free to relate this to the board. We're one of the things we're setting this up for, although we would literally stop. We would go back to the prior iteration with more lots if anyone just suggested that this should be conditioned upon some sort of acquisition by some of these lots. But there had been conversation about acquisition by the Conic Land Trust and the town with 2%, well, it's not 2.5% money, of these two lots. And John Halsey, who, as you know, is the head of the Conic Land Trust, said he was very concerned about changing the language in the ag easement different than the standard because it makes it more difficult for the town to be involved in the acquisition. Why? Because Mr. Halsey and the town have decided that this 2% money that's going to go to farmland is going to go to farmland that hopefully will be active farming as opposed to hobby farming or equestrian farming, something like that. So that's really something that has to be taken into consideration. And then since we're talking about these things, the concept of, on the Halsey farm, the park fee was waived. And I know there seems to be some concern about the park fee. To a certain degree, the park fee is in flux, but the New York State law, which enables subdivision approvals, the village law, does talk about park fees, regardless of the fact of whether or not you have some concerns about the way it's been locally administered. So these are all things that are on the table. I think you know what we were willing to also put on the table if we could come to resolution on these things in terms of an alternate access out to the pond if the village wasn't able to figure something out, and that in effect would be the compensation.
Yep.
So I think.
We know that.
And
Okay.
as
I've
they
talked
said
to
though,
Halsey.
farming
I've
is
talked to
always
Halsey.
changing.
We've done that. At least one of us. I've studied that. I've talked to John for hours. I'm trying to get a copy of the topping papers.
Oh, the ones with the recent acquisition.
Yeah, the recent acquisition will illuminate the issues.
Probably would.
And
Probably would.
And I've talked to experts about getting appraisals and about getting the CPF involved. And you're 2%. We've worked on that. We've worked on that really hard, but it doesn't happen overnight. Even if we spend all of our time, this is forthcoming. What do you want to do?
I'm not pushing an acquisition.
No, this is
What
what
I'm
we want to
saying is
do.
down the road, I'm trying to
This is what we
remove
want
roadblocks
to.
from it.
This is what we want to do.
Just I have a
Yes.
just a quick question. So would the concept be, and maybe I was mistaken if it's supposed to be, would the ag easement encompass all of the land as currently farmed, or to put it differently, if the two that would be the northerly lots north of the cul-de-sac end,
These two.
if the concept is that those might potentially continue to be farmed,
Yeah.
would the ag easement also encompass those?
Well, they'd be purchased subject to the 2% money, which by its nature limits and severely restricts the potential use. You
Okay.
There's more than one way to skin the cat with that.
Residential,
It's what
like
they come to
residential
agreement.
use on something that's bought with the 2% money or the land trust.
But I think
I mean,
you can
don't
see
wanna
how
get it- I don't want to
passionate
get it too far ranging because I get the sense.
you can see how passionate we are about this. I mean, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars just to preserve our right to farm. We don't have to preserve it, but we're trying to give back to the community here. And this is now 2 years of my life that I'm here every other Monday, and dollars out of my wallet. And I'm sorry to say that, but I want to farm. I want to preserve this, but I also want my family to have the option to do whatever is the right thing at the time. And I don't know what that is, but I say this all the time. Who knows if down the road they determine that, goat's milk cures cancer, and that's now the cash crop. I don't want my family's hands tied, so we could have that.
Yeah, so I want to come back to that point there. Look, we've heard you loud and clear from the very beginning, and I think one of the benefits of the path that we've come down is that we all have a death grip on the issues, right?
So.
And no one here in the room, and correct me if I'm wrong, believes that any issues, new issues, or change in direction is going to pop up. But part of our job is expectations management, to dot all the I's and cross all the
Right.
T's in a ag easement for a vote on July 15th, I think is optimistic. And I'm just trying to communicate that to you. So
Right, and I appreciate
people aren't
that.
surprised.
We know it's the first one, right, Bill?
But let me just land. The one question I have for you guys is, current village code prohibits animal husbandry in the village.
Depends on how you've defined it.
There is a definition of animal husbandry in the code that is basically 4 legs and fur,
I would
which is
say
pretty
that
broad.
I would say, and Mr. Carpenter and I can, Mr. Carpenter told you about it. I think that the right to farm laws and the Constitution probably, in all likelihood, void out that limitation for agricultural as opposed to personal use. If you're talking about personal use, there might be something there. I know on the corner of Layton Avenue, and I guess that's North Main there. There was a gentleman who had quite a few animals there, much to the consternation of the former mayor's mom. And that gave rise to a law about keeping animals
understand that law, it was a prohibition against personal non-agricultural use. So, I mean, we could talk about certain further restrictions, but I think it's inappropriate to take any sort of ability to have animals on the property outside of that covenant.
Yeah.
301 in the Ag and Markets Law is spot on about it.
Right, and that is a subtle enough issue that I don't think you're gonna get everybody comfortable with that in 2 weeks. And which is why I'm just trying to manage expectations
So I guess the
here.
question would be, how do we get comfortable with that? You know, and I'm just like wondering, like, how do we get, you know, you guys
I
to
think we owe you an
understand?
answer on that one. I think it's on multiple, from my personal perspective, it's along multiple fronts.
Yeah.
It's partly a legal discussion. It's partly a evaluation of the comps and on ag easements, right? There's some good comps. There's Halsey Kitty Corner. There's Halsey on the other side of the pond. There's this topping, which, you know, I've been trying to get a copy of that thing literally
Actually,
for
public record. This is
for
the
some
horse
reason.
farm in,
Yeah, the
right,
one that
it
was just done.
it was just done.
Right, by
in
John
Hampton,
Halsey.
right?
And
Yeah,
for
that's
12
fine.
weeks, I've been asking for
Send us
a
a
version of that. If you have a copy, I'd
We'll try to find it.
be grateful to have it.
I didn't see it on the county clerk's portal, to be honest.
But,
I didn't.
you know, so part of it is the legal aspect of it. Part of it is the comp discussion and
You've
what's been,
asked for it?
Yeah, I've asked the Peconic Land
we've
Trust.
asked everybody for
And
this.
you know, I'm saying, like, how can we help you? Like,
I've
how
asked
do
them.
we help
I've
you
asked
guys get the information you need to review it? So we'll work on trying to get that, and you know, hopefully that would be assistance to you. And you know,
Right.
we're trying to work with you here. You know,
And,
we're not trying to pull the sheets over your head. Is what I'm
and
trying to say.
we're not trying
you know?
to drag this on. Look, everybody, and I think we've been pretty consistent, is very supportive of your family's ability to continue farming. And, you know, we want to push that along and help you do that. The only other issues that are up are, you know, this driveway issue, which I don't think closing it's on the table. I think, you know, we've gotten feedback from a different traffic engineer, high level, that a slight redesign, but, you know, we should talk about that at some point, might be viable. But at least what's going to happen between the barns and Wickapog Fowler, you know, we've seen a landscape plan.
Right.
I think we need to tweak that a little bit. And then the third one, I'm sure you could tell from my questions where we were headed is, you know, on this view along Fowler Street into it.
Right.
Which is, again, it's an issue for some board members.
But
right?
you really
It's
need to
not
understand
that
that ag easements are not for views,
It's not
and they're
for
for
I-
farming. And I know what you're trying to accomplish, but that is like not what it's there for.
I'm just a messenger.
No, I understand. I'm not
Yeah, I
jumping
know,
down your throat.
But I'm going to be direct with every one of you. This is not an open space issue. This is for the preservation of agriculture. The fact that you have the Mezzacapa farm, which is not preserved, and everybody likes the view. The fact that across the street the Halseys have decided not to put any structures.
And then
there.
So, but
That's nice, but preservation of agriculture, which is in the state constitution, in the right to farm laws, in the ag and markets law, in your you know, the what's the village the
Comp plan.
You can't just say, gee, I want a nice, like one of the former board members literally looked at me and said, I want it to be planted in wildflowers. She wanted all the buildings on.
But that's also
an
like
extreme
just
view.
one example, though. You wouldn't tell a resident you can't have privet to block your yard, right? So like it's the same kind of thing, you know. Like,
yeah, I get that.
So
But-
that's where it needs to be like a
So
little.
can you give us your perspective on what's happening Kitty Corner with that Halsey piece? Because is that ag?
That's-
Is that a viewscape? Is that ag reserve?
No.
And
They keep the privet low on the corner
Yeah.
for traffic.
Yeah,
I
that's the
understand
traffic, so you can see
It
around
was-
the corner.
It was an agreement by Glenn Halsey
Right.
for Mr. DePietris asked him specifically, I'm told, I wasn't at the hearing, I didn't hear, but Attorney DePietris acting, I believe, for, I may it was the zoning board, but possibly the trustees asked him to curtail the height of the vegetation, and it was agreed to by Glenn Halsey.
I haven't found anything.
Well, that's.
And just one mention about that though, if you ever been down there during a snowstorm, you can't get through because of the terrible drifts. You know, because that privet is so low, it actually creates a
And
drift.
the other thing in terms of
That
how
was a
these things
request.
all come
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
you know that Halsey farm across the street, not the one on the same side of the road? that's a maxed out yield, that farm. Nothing like
You mean on the other side of the pond or the
no,
kitty corner
on
from
the other
this?
side of
Wicker
Pond.
Yeah, on the
looking
corner.
north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The north, that's a max yield. That's a standard subdivision with
understand.
voluntary open space, but
What-
nothing like this.
What about
It's
the
a-
reserve on the other side of the pond that's also
Halsey.
Halsey? What,
It's about six
are
and a
they-
half acres, right? 6.5 acres.
what do they do, what are they planting there?
They rotate. That's the whole purpose of farming.
It's
So
open.
they rotate every year. They grow pumpkins, they grow corn, they grow
Open.
potatoes.
This is on the west side of the pond.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the west
open,
side.
Correct.
undeveloped.
And there's, are they doing anything for dust management over there?
Yeah, it's arborvitae around the whole thing. They're
Around the-
20 feet tall.
Gotcha.
by the
Okay.
road.
All right. So
So-
these are the issues,
Right.
right? And look, I have no expectation, zero expectation that anything, I'd be really surprised if anything pops up.
Yeah.
July 15th, you know,
Right.
could be difficult. So you guys decide
Yeah.
whether, you know,
Yeah.
you
No,
want,
that's-
how, how, just in managing your process,
Right.
how you want to proceed, and let us know.
That's not fair to spend 2 years and say, I need another 2 weeks to look at an ag
Well-
easement. I used to, when I was the town attorney in Southampton, I'd probably look at 3 ag easements,
Yep.
every 2 weeks, because the development was going on at a fast pace. And 301 of the Ag and Markets Law, compatible recreational uses, we took that out of here. We gave it a much higher ability, much harder to change the terms of the ag reserve easement. It's the most restrictive ag easement I've ever drafted, and that's representing a lot of farmers over the last, in my land use practice for 42 years. The most restrictive I've ever drafted. So it should not take that long to look at this ag easement.
Let us
So
know.
do you think those other points though are going to be in this document? Say the ag easement's not in there, and say you reference a general term saying, an ag easement.
Addressing the following
Right.
points.
Yes.
What about those other items that were in the document?
You mean like the driveway? And
Yeah,
the-
all that stuff. Yeah, and the
I mean, the
pond
five
access
big
and
point driveway, pond access. Help me out here. I know there were like 4 or
There's
5.
this privet,
Mhm.
Yeah.
the park fee, the redoing the access here.
Yeah.
Okay, the terms of the ag easement.
the landscape planting, which we've
Well, the
agreed
landscape
to.
planting to me is we've agreed to that.
But
Right.
it's- Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to show us a plan, right? The one that you showed us, I don't think.
Well, so what
Plan for it.
You know,
what
you
is I guess we need guidance. Like, what don't you like about that specifically? Because I'm not just going to go and have something changed and then come back and say we don't like that either. So can you tell me what specifically the board is looking for there?
Well, I think
Because I need to
the
leave it
pla-
open in the middle so I can actually grow crops there. And I do have some plants there right now. It is resting. We're very limited what we can plant there. It is outside the deer fence. So as you
Right.
know, the deer mow down everything.
Right.
So I want the ability to continue to use that to grow crops or whatever it is at the time.
This area here.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think the last plan we saw had high landscaping along the road, so you really couldn't see.
No, it
what
wasn't high. It was low.
That was the Arius design plan. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite low.
Which
You have it? Yeah, you
Yeah.
have it. Hold on.
Perfect.
so it would just be helpful to know like what exactly you're looking for, so I can come back because I'm open to that kind of stuff.
I mean, we took a shot at this, but no one's really given us any specific plans. No one's given us any specific feedback. Which, you know something, we're owed.
Rich, do you mind just giving us a summary of what's going on along Fowler Street in terms of plantings?
This stuff through here?
Yeah, what is that? Because I can't see that far.
So there's some deciduous trees, 3 deciduous trees right here. And I think these are samples of what they are. So this is a concept plan. These are shrubs down underneath, and then there are some other taller, it looks like arborvitae. Looks like there's a fir.
Yeah, but that's my point. Eventually, that stuff is going to grow and screen everything between that.
Well, we could
So
put
the
it-
idea for this was to give like seasonal color, right? So like different seasons, different blooms, and it was to soften the barns, right? But not completely block them.
Correct,
And
and
then-
provide some kind of viewscape. This, you
Right.
know,
Yeah,
right.
Right.
You wanna put
So
a
that was the whole
package
idea of the color and everything.
Yeah.
I believe didn't we see the 3D renderings? No,
I
so
don't-
maybe next
I don't
next
remember.
time we can bring like the,
Did you have renderings?
Yeah.
Wanna go get them?
I can, yeah.
Okay, let's go.
You
go
have 2
get
minutes?
them. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
Could you point out
Okay.
where the agriculture would take place? But the other thing, by the way, just so you know, this is, yeah, the agriculture will take place.
They won't have the ability to use that. Our understanding was to soften the view of the law.
And this is very critical. These access points have worked, Mark. These
Yes, sir.
access points have worked. And there are tractor trailers to come in to bring up products sometimes. And I know from doing probably every single car dealership on the automobile way up there, and one in the village, the primary thing you want is circulation here. So you can get larger trucks in here and they don't have to sit out here.
Totally get that.
You know,
Yeah, I
so it
understand.
makes all the sense in the world.
Do you want to comment on,
I can give them a copy of the memo.
From who?
So Russell Scott is a traffic engineer at Nelson and Pope, took a look at it, and from the mile high view, just the amount of traffic that is on Wickapog, and you know that it's not striped. It's kind of a different intersection there. He felt that it would be better if it were aligned. The driveway were aligned with the north-south portion of Wickapog. Again, he said, you know, this is a cursory review, but the geometry and site access is non-standard and should be reviewed.
so, to
We're not willing to do that. We're not willing to change that.
yeah.
I mean, it's might as well lay it right on the line. We're not willing to change this.
So what that all meant,
Could we get a copy of that report?
yeah, sure, what that,
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
for,
And I wish I'd had that report 6 months ago. It's really been a frustration.
but what, in effect, that report was saying was take that driveway and just move it to my left, your right. So it's more of a direct line as you're cut, yeah. So it's more of a direct line coming down the north-south Wickapog Road access.
How much? How much?
I wasn't,
This is the sort of stuff that is really 2 years into this. I mean, that really annoys me. That I've taken that long to get a memo.
70 feet, that's a long way.
I don't think it's that far, because it's, if you drew a line on the west side of that barn, Rick, if you drew a straight line, you know, on a north-south axis, it would be on the west side of that north-south line.
Well, the memo says the existing site access of the Fowler Farm is approximately 70 feet to the west of the intersection of Fowler
So-
and Wickford Road, and the access is uncontrolled. It sounds to me like this little 3-paragraph memo is saying you got a little bit without any like basis for it. So
We're not,
Try to-
we're-
this is what we
tried to-
Oriented
memo.
traffic report.
Using the existing trees in place, and, you know, if you wanna look at this, I mean, that shows the existing trees right there, you know, so now you want us to cut down the existing village trees, now we gotta relocate power lines, telephone poles. These are existing trees.
now, we're not asking you to do anything yet, I'm just,
No, I know, but
I'm
that's what I'm
just,
talking about.
I'm just, you want all the facts out there, everything
Right.
that, you know, we're considering, or that we've been told or shown, you know, it's full disclosure, I'm just,
But if you're saying
putting
you
it
want
out
a
in the
couple of different treatment through here, we'll work that
Yeah, I
out.
mean, if you want it shorter, we'll make it shorter, I mean, I have
Less expensive for that.
yeah. I mean, I think always the idea there was to try and keep that,
If you want an
Open.
affirmative duty to maintain a certain height there, I don't have any problem with that either, because I understand, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. But
Okay.
these are the sort of things that, you know, this is the first time in, when did we first submit this plan? 6 months ago? It's the first time we've had any substantive comments about it. So you can understand the frustration. If somebody has any comments about the species or the number of plants, the whole idea is to be able to farm this in here, because it's valuable farmland, as Mr. Carpenter has informed you, in just a very objective fashion. If you have any changes to this, or you want us to be able to
you want
have
it
an
lower.
affirmative duty to
It's a
maintain it at a certain height,
Right.
that's not a problem.
And the other question is, though, because I've heard mixed reviews about the barns, some have said, we like seeing the barns, and some have said, screen the barns, so I guess that's where we're at too.
think, I think there's flexibility on that one.
You know, like, do you want to see the barns and know it's a farm, or do you want them screened out?
Yeah, I think there's flexibility on that.
But we might as well put it on the table.
Right.
If we can get satisfaction, to our satisfaction on all of these issues, no park fee, the privet stays where it is, these lines don't change, and there's a reasonable, typical agricultural easement, we're more than happy to say that if the village can't work out pond access on a much, much more intelligent site down the street, then, and there's good faith in trying to do that, then we can try to provide some of that. And I think that's massive, because I will tell you, and I will not be, I'm reading a book now called Purchasing Submission by Philip Hamburger, who's a renowned constitutional scholar in administrative law. And every page I read, including cites to Nolan and Dolan, say that attempt to coerce, and that's all it is, that sort of, he says two things, that the request for public access over private property without any sort of nexus is unconstitutional, but also unconstitutional is delaying and trying to coerce it, which is what's happened here. But if we can get comfort on all these other things, not comfort, but we can get agreement that you all agree about these 4 other items, we will be able to provide that alternate access if the village can't, after good faith, trying to get it somewhere else, needs it over.
So those 4 concepts were, I'm sorry to make you repeat it again, but the privet,
The privet, not changing this, no park fee, forgetting one other thing.
Modified landscape plan in the front there, which is fine. That was in the original.
I don't see that as a big, what,
Park fee, ag easement, privet, access relocation of barns, those are in the pond access, those are the issues.
in the pond access. So what we're telling you is if you will concede all our points on those items, we can provide an alternate easement to the pond if the village is not able to negotiate it down the street.
The right thing is the pond flows to the ocean. It always has. We're trying to do as near the ocean as you can. It's a joint effort,
Yeah.
period.
You have to understand something, and you have to understand something absolutely. I am not arguing that is a public benefit, but what I'm telling you, and I have not found any authority to the contrary, is that that's not a public benefit that you can pull out of me without compensation. So if you waive the park fee, leave this alone, we come to reasonable terms.
You're making an argument that's unnecessary. That's not what we're doing. If you have to make the argument later, do it. If you can invent the first village ag easement, you're going to be a genius. You've done many of them. Please don't pre-negotiate all this stuff.
So when will we see a document
We're
for
agreeing to all this stuff.
the 15th?
We have to, because we're down the road that far.
If I may,
Time
I
ago.
have to say, I'm sort of in the same boat that you are in the sense that some of these things I've never heard of until tonight. It sounds like there's agreements and conversations going on that not
I mean,
everyone on the board knows.
directly,
No.
without insulting you, and then you just haven't been listening because
No,
these
I wasn't in the
items have
room
been
where it happened, so I just
all
want
There
to,
was no agreements. This has all been talked about every month, every 2 weeks when we come here.
For example, the privet, the conversation that the privet is not doable because of dust or whatnot, that's new.
And it was
From-
new for us when it came up in the
I just
surprise
learned it
easement,
right now.
when it came up in the surprise resolution too. That was never on the table until we got that surprise. So
I'm not sure what document you're referring to, but the conversation about wanting to have some sort of view shed on the Fowler side into the farming operation. What I'm hearing tonight for the first time is that's not doable
Right.
because the privet jeopardizes something with the farming. Is it possible, since that was such an important part for at least me, I understood that we were trying to we had moved the easement, the ag easement, so that the public could sometimes see parts of it and be a part of this farming. And without with the privet that runs the whole length of Fowler, it could be 100% subdivision. People will not see the views of your farm.
Right.
Can't you provide limited access without privet? It's one area, certain areas, even if they're narrow, it doesn't have to be it's not the whole expanse, it's some area of that does not have a privet so that someone can see into the farming
Can't see it now.
at certain points.
Right, and that's the thing, you can't see now, and it's there for a reason, like it's there because it's needed. It's not just there because we're like, we don't want anybody to see in. Like, we've had
Right,
complaints from neighbors. We're trying to be a good neighbor and a good steward, so it's there for a reason.
But that's something that you've obviously heard that we wanted, and I'm hearing that now we can't see it
It was
from
in the
that side.
document that you guys were getting ready to approve that night
It
that
was
we
in
saw
the,
5 minutes before the
proposed,
meeting.
John. It was
I
in-
remember. I mean, the language that I know. I don't know who proposed it, but I know someone was talking about. Well, it'd be nice if school kids, if they were on a field trip, they'd be able to see
Right,
the
well, I think I
land.
did,
that
but
was
we had written a
farmed.
document, or we had all worked on a document, that was one of the things in the document.
Yes.
I don't know if that was submitted.
that was never
because it a draft,
ratified.
but it
So
was
that's
never-
why we're kind of back to.
So this is the first time I'm hearing that may not be possible.
Right.
Where is there a vantage point into the farming?
Right up front. The front, you can see it's a farm. There's
barns.
There's barns, it's a farm. You see my tractors drive down the road. That's the vantage.
That's
So
the
there's
actual
not,
farming.
there's no way to put any limited doorway view shed into.
But what
the
does it
Upper
matter?
Shane
What does it matter though if I'm planting, specimen arborvitae on the
No, it's
inside of
just
the
fact
fence and you
seeing
can't
it
see
rather
in?
than seeing a perfect,
But it's the
a
same
hedge.
crop being grown. Privet on the outside and privet on the inside. So that's the. I know what you're trying to accomplish, but at the same point, we're almost 2 years in and
The point,
we're not
the
even
point-
there.
The point is.
No, I just had never heard that it wasn't
Right.
going to happen. So
What's
there
the
is a
difference between
disconnect,
having
and I'm
met,
with
if I
you.
may?
Yeah, and we're trying to close that
Yeah,
disconnect.
and the park fee, I don't know what's the new development is with that, but it sounds like there's something about that. So
We don't even know. We hear
We don't-
talks
I
of the
don't know
trustees
either. I don't know
changing
either.
the park
So-
fees. So
Was
we're-
that done? yet?
So I don't know what we're talking
That's what we
about.
keep hearing, that something got done to
Um,
trustees and,
It
you know.
doesn't matter, that's a whole,
Right.
that's just a smoke and mirrors that what the former board member brought up. Under the New York State Village Law, this village has the ability to impose a park fee, and we want you, just as was happened on the Halsey property across the street, to commit not to waive that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the compensation for having the sort of springing access to Phillips Pond if you can't get it down here. These are all good things, and I'm gonna say again, this is a 12 lot yield. We're doing 7. 12 lots. That's 12 lots. That's 5 buildable lots. And we met with appraisers and we met with brokers, and they were 12 lots, and it's nip and tuck. You might make out better with the 12 lots, just like across the street where the Halsey, that's a maximum yield subdivision. But I'm again, I think at one point, I don't want to quote you without your permission, but I'm going to ask you if I can say what you said out of frustration at one meeting almost a year ago. Where's the thank you?
Right. And that's just definitely where our family feels, because we've done so much for the village and we continue, like that, the public would not have access to the beach if it wasn't for our family. That was a farm road that we dedicated to the village for the public, right? Like, we've preserved other properties. We donated 2 properties further south down by the beach, which I guess that's where the village.
The Fowler Park.
Right, the Fowler Park up the road. We've done so much over the years. Like, I think our track record has proven that we're not trying to do anything wrong here, and we're just trying to continue our farm. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to go and sell all this off. Like, this is so dear to us that, we want to continue to have the farm. But we know tragedy all too well. Is my father dropped dead at 50. My grandfather dropped dead at 50. My aunt dropped dead at 52. Tragedy strikes and you don't know when it's coming.
And then
This
you
is
have
for
taxes
estate
to
planning.
pay.
Yes, and then exactly. So as each generation dies, the more you have to sell to pay the inheritance tax. So we're trying to minimize that so we can start putting some of my kids' names and
I just want to say that about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a suggestion, there was a bill floated in Congress that said that if there was, in terms of farmland, in terms of estate taxes, if the properties were kept in active farming, that there would be a deferral, such as you would have on a like-kind exchange or something like that. And interestingly enough, the then member of the House of Representatives who represented this area, whose grandfather's a farmer in Tagaponic, voted no. So when these things happen, the farm families are met with this, and there is no choice but to render to Caesar, and sometimes some of the farm has to be sold off, and that's not something. I mean, there's novels about it, there's films about it. It's it's sad but true. I mean, they've held on where a lot of people have sold off. They really have. So, excuse me. Downs Family Farm across the street.
Yep.
The entire thing.
So, understand, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Just
guys.
want to,
Right.
Look, all the cards are out on the table.
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
managing it,
We'll try to get there.
we're trying to get there.
Right.
Let's see how much progress we can make over the next 2 weeks. If
All
we
we
get
can do is
there,
ask.
great.
And
I
can we
just
see
don't
that document with,
Yeah, well, step one, does the board want to authorize me to again try and
I
draft
think
up?
we need to digest this. I think we need some legal advice on some things, and then you guys coordinate, communicate.
But I
if
see
you
no
authorize
problem
him to
with-
draft something,
Mhm.
it becomes what is necessary, which is the focal point for discussion. You're not committing to anything. Let him draft a proposed approval. He already started one of them. That becomes the focal point. I think that's a good idea.
So let's talk specifically about what that approval would have in it
Mhm.
with respect to the ag easement, right? Because that's a topic that I want to have read, and all the members here to have read the comps on that, and also have the benefit of a conversation with you on the legal aspects of that. Everything else, I don't think we're far away.
We're gonna see if we can
But
get
on that one?
topping.
Yeah.
Let us see what we can do.
John, and this was maybe 2 weeks ago, but I looked on the county portal. You know how you can pull up the land records. I didn't see anything. Maybe I was looking at
Did
the
you
wrong
ask
tax
John
map.
Halsey? Wasn't he
Yes.
involved?
I asked the Peconic
Yeah, he
Land
was
Trust.
involved.
You and I are gonna call John Halsey tomorrow, okay?
John's usually sailing her at a meeting. I asked the
Yes,
Peconic
but I
Land
think
Trust
you
3
mentioned-
weeks ago.
language about just referencing an ag easement to be.
Mhm. So that's what, and what I want to avoid is not to sound flippant, but the very definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. Me
Yes.
drafting something and us, all the scuttlebutt over it.
Right.
So if the board wanted me to direct something that kind of runs through the bullet points of what an acceptable ag easement would be, and
that as
then-
well, because really, it's really the heart of it is in the reservations and the restrictions. The rest is all pretty much boilerplate.
Yep.
What the farmer is reserving and how he or she is restricted.
Mhm.
I mean, I drafted the full easement which we sent to you, but John and I talked about this. Really, the heart of it is the reservations and the restrictions.
So do any of the board members have an issue with directing John to draft that resolution, but as Rick said, to leave the ag easement TBD?
Well, I think there's other issues with the easement to the pond, as you said, that you're gonna,
No.
this isn't, that's still, there's several balls in the air still, so
No.
do you want?
But it's not- this
The
isn't-
approval can,
This is nothing new
is
here.
conditional
No.
to this, and this, but
We
in
still
2
have
weeks, those things are
preliminary,
still,
like,
right.
for that to come.
Mhm.
Yeah, so which other balls in the air are you referring to?
Well, we still don't know how that easement's going to work. We've been, tonight, several things have come up that are new. So I don't think it's a problem in drafting the approval, subject to agreement on the following. To get to those agreements is gonna take more than 2 weeks, I think, because
So we're
we
gonna
haven't.
take a shot at it.
So here's what I'm hearing. I mean, I just want to make sure I understand. On the easement issue, it's either the one down the road or theirs, right? It's either or, right? Those are options.
I'm not married to these reservations and restrictions if I can have some substantive comments. And who knows, that might be, okay, that's not a problem, or maybe this is a problem.
Right.
But the problem is that unless you have a focal point for all these things in a proposed resolution, we're going to be nowhere. And you're not committing yourself to anything. John, draft something, circulate it, we'll use it as the discussion point. That just makes a lot of sense.
You okay
I
with
will,
that?
Yeah, I have no
Are
problem.
you
with that.
okay with that?
I will just say with respect to the flexibility in farming and having the full scope, I think you get further if you can limit the livestock, the animals. That was something that was never brought to our attention that that would be in it. And that was something that we didn't want because based on other,
But on that,
you know, there's horse farms, but then we were thinking trees or crops or farming, not livestock. So that's something that's important. We need to hear more about why.
The zoning code prohibits it. You still can't do it. But it's easier to change the zoning code if in the future they decide that, you know, milk from goats is something that's gonna cure cancer. You can change the zoning code a lot easier than you can change an easement once it's filed with the land.
So would your thought be something along the lines of like, to the extent not otherwise prohibited by zoning?
That's fine. That's fine.
That's
I do think the notion of though, with the houses, with the nature of the subdivision, there is case law and there are examples of how livestock, horses, et cetera, are very different than ground crops and, you know, trees and that. So
well, nuisance law is a whole. That's a conversation that we
Right,
could.
that's a whole-
That's literally a semester-long
Literally.
conversation.
Wasn't it mentioned in one of the meetings that it's going to be very clear that this is an active farm on these documents, so everyone knows that when they
You can add to the covenants that are required in the subdivision a notice covenant, as every subdivision that has an ag reserve to it, there's notice to the people living that there's the farming operation and there's dust, pesticides, insecticides, all the things that are involved with farming. And this started happening when I was the planning board lawyer many years ago, because the then chairman came to me and said, I am so sick and tired of people buying next to a farmland and then being surprised that there's farming going on next door. So would you please put some notice covenants in these things, which is more than happy to do. I'm a total, have no patience for somebody who buys a piece of property next to an agricultural reserve and starts complaining.
Well, just for the board's edification too, anything that we would do, that any document that we would require would have to be filed with the office of the county clerk. So when any lot owner down the road pulls their title search or has a title search run contemplating buying a property, these things come in the title report.
Exactly.
So no one will be blindsided by the existence of this.
I understand that, but I'm also wondering, a horse farm's very different than a normal farming, even different than goat milk. So how does that, the horse
How is it
element
different?
come in?
how is it
What is your
different?
thinking about? Well, you can tell me because I'm not the farmer,
No,
but they
well,
seem
the
very
suggestion
different.
was that it was
Take over.
different.
I'm going to
I'm
defer
just trying to
to.
understand the
Thank-
options.
Thank you, and I admit I'm not a livestock specialist, but according to the definitions under ag and markets, livestock is livestock, whether it's horses, which are considered livestock, beef cattle, cows, so it's all lumped under one specific grouping when you say livestock. And from a perspective of agriculture, I agree with what Rich said, which is if it's prohibited in the code, let it be prohibited in the code, and that's a battle for an issue discussion for another day, depending upon whether the Department of Ag and Markets deems that it's over restrictive in town code, that it's not allowed on a parcel that's in an ag district, which I believe this is.
Because what you're trying to do with the imposition of a condition, and this is interesting, and no, you don't have to be a lawyer to read this book. It's called Purchasing Submission by Philip Hamburger. What agencies sometimes do is through conditions impose restrictions that they otherwise wouldn't have the ability to do. So, and I'm not just saying that for the heck of it. It's a fascinating read. It really talks about the way agencies limit freedoms when if it was part of the law they couldn't. They impose conditions. I mean, just to give a silly example, not a silly example, a frightening example. Just to give a frightening example, and it's not germane to zoning law, the aid to dependent families, you could sign up and you could get money for aid to dependent families, but you had to give up your Fourth Amendment rights to search and seizures. It's a shocking tale of agencies by conditions imposing things that they couldn't do by regulation. I'm not trying to get too far away or too philosophical, but these are the things that farmers have to deal with. But why don't, if I may, oh, I'm sorry, Rob.
want to talk about the topic. I apologize. It's really important.
Okay with Borgwin doing a draft?
So if I could, I'd like to address the topping easement for a moment. As
Gentlemen.
as you may or may not know, there are different agricultural easements depending upon the pool of money, what's sold, what farmers agree to, and many other conditions. What Mr. Fowler is going to decide is based upon his rights as a farmer on this particular piece of property. And you can't compare apples to oranges to grapefruits as being all one. The topping easement is a special easement with a specific set of specific restrictions that is different than this ag reserve easement.
Yes.
So I'm going to please caution both Mr. Fowler and Mr. Bennett to make sure that we're dealing with apples to apples when it comes to that easement. The topping easement was an enhanced easement with additional restrictions that the topping family was paid for and they agreed to,
That's a significant difference.
which is a big difference than having a board come in and say, we're going to demand this, and this for what is not a traditional agricultural easement.
So that would be as if you were
That's why
requiring
we
the
wanna
open
get it.
space and on top of that.
Understood.
insisting on- That would be
As if you're requiring the open space and then on top of that, insisting on conditions that otherwise wouldn't be available to you. So thank you for that. That's a very, very significant statement. Thank you.
Yeah, understood. And my view, and I'd like to hear other board members, is that the finer points of this ag easement, all these things we've just been discussing, is a discussion that's best had at the preliminary plat, step 2 of the process, not between now and July 15th. All the rest,
that's
all the
something
rest
that-
of the stuff,
Something that we might consider if
All
we
the-
get to.
yeah, all the rest of the
on the
stuff,
re- all the rest of the
I
stuff,
don't
yeah.
think we're far apart. I don't
Yeah.
think we've ever been far apart, right? And I think that I'd like a motion to I'll make a motion to authorize John here to begin to draft that resolution that you'll circulate to us first, and then if it's fine, then we'll share it,
Okay,
okay?
great, thanks.
And so we kind of have a look out between now and July 15th. Again, we have a death grip on all the issues, right? So everybody's,
Please just
there are no
get it to us.
surprises. And
Prompt
Amanda,
time to,
Yeah.
that way if there's any modifications that need to be made,
Of
you guys
course.
have enough time to.
before I ask for a second, you have a comment.
I also want to ask you for some clarification on the additional structures that in your version of the ag easement.
They'd be subject to planning board approval.
Right, but from our vantage point, there's pre-existing structures on the
They're
area
not
of the ag.
pre-existing, that's a term of art. They're existing legal structures. They're not
Okay.
pre-existing non-conforming structures, they're existing legal structures.
So
Because pre-existing
the
is a term
idea
of art.
of adding more, reducing land and adding more structure is something that we would prefer not to happen. We'd like you to have more land than structure. What are your thoughts about adding those structures and why would
Well,
you?
if these-
No, listen to me.
If
The
you-
document requires that we come to the planning board for any review. I'm not gonna have him speculate as to what he may or may not do, or anybody down the road may or may not do. I don't know if you know this, but if you go by the Halsey farm, on the corner of Scuttle Hole and Deerfield, and Head Pond, look at the southerly portion of it. It's fully covered with greenhouses, which you didn't have to get planning board approval for. We're saying we'll come back here, but I'm not gonna have him speculate. Do not answer the question.
No,
I'm not
but
gonna
the
have
only
him
thing I just want to
speculate.
say is, as ag changes, so does the regulations. As Rob said, farming is very much regulated by the Department of Agriculture, the county health department. More and more restrictions come out. So I'll use Adam Halsey as an example. The state required, or the health department required, that you need a washing facility. He didn't have one, and he sells produce, so he had to build a washing facility. So that's an additional structure, So I don't know what's going to come down the pike, but rest assured that if something does come down, we still have to come before you to make sure that you're okay with it.
The current code does not require
I
that.
can't just
but
go
we
and
put
start
it in
digging
there.
and put something out.
We put it in there.
That is correct. Under the current code, agricultural buildings are exempt from site plan. They could go get a building permit. I'm assuming you would just need a normal building permit.
Correct.
And you could build a washing station, what have you. But
Right.
under what's proposed is they would have to come back in front of us for site plan review, akin to what we've done for Buzz Jew, akin for what we're doing on the theater, some sort of review to make sure that the building functions properly. Ingress, egress.
That's a
those sorts
massive
of-
give
And
back
that's
for a farmer.
what we're giving to you guys. I don't have to. I could be hard-headed, and just say we're not doing that. But that's just us trying to assure you, like, that you guys still can have a say over
Okay,
this.
good.
So,
Great, thank you. So, motion, which I previously articulated,
Seconded.
Alan's gonna second, all in favor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for,
All
Thank you.
opposed?
Thank you all.
thanks a lot.
Thank you. You too.
Rob, thank you for coming.
Include a motion to adjourn minutes to the
Thank you.
And,
July 4th.
and a motion to adjourn this, a second motion I'll make to adjourn this, thank you, Alex, to adjourn this to July, our next meeting in July 15th.
15th?
15th. Second?
Second.
Isn't it the 15th?
Yeah.
Monday. Yep, all in
Monday.
favor?
Monday the 15th.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Third motion I'm gonna make tonight is to approve the minutes from the June 3rd and June 17th.
No. Haven't reviewed.
What about the ones I got today?
Yeah, I still need to get comments back from you guys.
Okay, so we have no motions, no
No.
minutes. Okay, I'll take that back. Last thing I'm gonna do is recuse myself, because you're gonna discuss
Yeah.
54 Main,
Yep.
and there, I don't need, you don't need to.
Member Dye has reviewed a letter which has been written by council,
So when you're done,
which you're recusing yourself to deal with.
right,
It is a proposed letter to go from this board to the zoning board of appeals on a matter for which you're recusing yourself.
so I don't need to step out for that, right?
Well, I think it's
I
done.
would do so out of.
Okay, I'll step out, but when, can somebody just make a motion to close the meeting after that? Because I
Yeah.
think we're done after that. Okay.
We can come back after that. Unless you don't want to.
I don't need to. I'll be back, but, you know.
We'll bark at you.
You're hungry?
Yeah. No, I'll be right, I'll be down the hall.
Good.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the meeting's record will show that we're thanking council for producing a draft. I think we've all seen a copy up here on the workstation. I have signed one as acting chairman in his absence. It is a matter for which our chairman has probably rightfully recused himself. He's being very, very generous. This is a proposed letter to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Southampton, dated July 1 today, and I've signed it, and just to raise the issue concerning the lot that we were struggling to do for the, I think, I forget the proponent, but it was the building lot to build a structure, a residence, and we wanted to insist, as we did earlier, and again, that it be a flag lot.
Correct.
This letter raises that issue very specifically with the zoning board, whose personnel is changing as of now. Has been the organization meeting held yet?
No.
When is it coming?
Tuesday.
Tomorrow?
Sorry, next Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Next Tuesday, it'll be officially changed as to personnel. It will go then. Thank you very much. I've signed a copy.
All right.
Will you execute it?
We'll ask for a motion.
So there's also,
We'll entertain a motion that we approve this letter.
well, first things first, just for sequence, I also prepared a resolution. It's 2 pages. It's printed front and back. I apologize for that.
Oh, yeah.
This is just to authorize, to resolve to send this letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals and to
okay.
authorize Mr. McFarland to
Okay.
sign
Yep.
on our behalf.
Okay.
So who is ever taking the roll call on that, just
The motion is that we approve this resolution. Any second?
Second.
Okay, the aye? The aye,
And I
the
see
ayes have
Deborah's
it.
voting
Okay.
aye as well.
okay?
This has been approved and the letters has been signed.
Okay.
For you
So
to
just
send, thank you for your help.
So just print your name on the back, the second page of the resolution, where the planning board authorizes blank, put Alan McFarland. to execute said letter of July 1 on his behalf, and you'll see the roll call is below that.
And do we need another resolution to adopt the letter?
No, this is
Okay.
Adopt the
Okay,
resolution.
great.
Just a housekeeping in the future,
It
no
says
hyphen on
something.
Grove full name.
John, you got that?
Is that on there?
Yeah, that's okay.
I got the accent though.
I know, you get points for that.
Okay, so,
Tell him he can go home.
so with that, the signature, I will take this and distribute it to the Board of Zoning.
No, it's
You have
Bag is here.
Yes.
I also have.
Okay, ask him to close the meeting.
William,
What do you want?
to print your name right
are you leaving?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I'll talk to you.
His bag is here.
There he is.
You're welcome back in.
No, they didn't close the meeting yet, though.
Thank you, sir. I missed this one.
So I assume there's no other business.
No, just to note that our next two meetings are scheduled for July 15th and August 5th. So hopefully we'll have quorum for both those meetings.
Okay. Good. Motion to adjourn the meeting. Second.
Amanda seconded.
Amanda
I vote
seconds.
aye.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everyone.